Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Topical Talkology talk. How are you, Theo?
I'm very well, Andy. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. So tell me, how have you been this week?
Very busy, just like you, because we haven't had time to touch base at all.
No, we haven't at all. So what have you been up to?
I've been developing my practice. I've been developing new ideas and actually looking at the today's topic of conversation on Topical Talkology, which is about confidence, based on something that you told me last week, a quote no less.
Well, we talked about it last week, actually, and it was a quote by Marianne Williamson, who's running for the U.S. presidency at the moment for the Democratic Party. It's unlikely she'll get very far, but she's highly spiritual. And funny enough, I was listening to Fox News the other week. I think it was called The Five or something, and she's actually been quite impressive. And they've been talking about how they've almost got them reaching out for their crystals and things like this. But she did come up with this quote that was also that Nelson Mandela also used in his inauguration speech when he was made president. And I think it was like, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. I mean, there's more to it quite than that, but that was the essence of it. What do you think of that?
I think it's nonsense.
Really? Why is that?
Of course. Because that's not people's fear. Their fear is not that if they unleash themselves, they will achieve a million times more than they ever thought they could. That's not their greatest fear. Their greatest fear is thinking that they are going to fail at that which they think they should achieve.
Actually, that's a very good. That's actually a very good analysis on that. Actually, because I was also listening. Oh, actually, I sent you the link to Simon Sinek the other week, who actually was the. I mean, he's written about 5 books, but the one I've got at home is the Leaders Eat Last, and he talked about the millennial generation, and that it's not their fault, but predominantly what he was saying was that they've been told that they are special from a very young age, that they've been empowered and everything like this, and they can do anything. And when they leave school and they come out into the real world, for example, there's almost like a reality check in terms of actually they realise that they're not as special as they are, and then they just go into this place of inadequacy. Because they're not achieving what they've been told they were going to achieve that they should be achieving their whole life. So the expectation that's been put on them to be more powerful beyond measure in this case doesn't live up to that expectation when actually reality comes on, when they actually have to pay bills and they can't use video games anymore. I mean, actually, I know I'm generalizing in terms of millennials, but we know that they actually want a bit more freedom. They want to make an impact and things like this. And even Simon Sinek said, what does that mean?
There's 2 intertwining roots, however, to that quote. The first root is religious, and as you said, at least one of them is spiritual. And of course, I don't know what 20 years of imprisonment did to Nelson Mandela, but highly it's likely he'd become spiritual as well, as a form of solace. And of course, God, the one theory of Christianity and the power of Christianity, and saying that God is in all of us and all of us are divine and so on, is simply that there is nothing more powerful than the truth. Nothing can withstand the power of truth.
Well, let me ask you another question. Actually, let me ask you this question: is faith not important to have?
Yes, absolutely. Well, yes
right.
and no. Why faith in what?
But the thing is, we put.
Faith is important for humans.
I know you always keep to come back to the religious topic, but having faith that things are going to be okay, is that not a way of being able to, in some ways, encourage happiness or encourage something to believe in, something that's going to give you a little bit more, help you develop a purpose and things like that?
Well, that's the power of religion, isn't it? Absolutely right. And we'll certainly come back to that in a second, because the second root of that saying is in fact the big lie of Western society, which is you can achieve whatever you want, which is complete nonsense, because of course you can't. You can only achieve what you can, and you can optimize yourself and do your best. But this idea that you can have whatever you want, promulgated by the West, promulgated by parents telling their kids they can do what they want, promulgated by social media showing people having untold wealth and riches, and via mirror neurons making you think you can have it and want it, which is the huge lie and the cause of enormous resentment and backlash in society when people realise eventually when they hit their 40s and 50s that they can't get it and they're miserable failures.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've got to disagree with you to a degree here, because there's people who, how can I put it? And I'm going to think about this one, and how am I going to say it? And here's the thing. If people believe less than what they're capable of, they'll never actually achieve their full potential. And if you actually let them know or tell them that actually, this is the best you're ever going to be, they're not going to actually strive to actually be better or be a better person or a better version of themselves. And
who's going to say this is the best you? Who says that to anyone? What you say is the best you can be is yourself. I'll give you an example. I asked one of my clients what he wanted. What was his goals, and he said to be happy and successful. Now that is a recipe for unhappiness, and in fact there was a very interesting TED talk. I don't remember the name of the lecture. He was an Asian gentleman, and he has done a lot of research looking at successful people, and he's managed to interview and analyze superstars, CEOs, billionaires. And he came out with a 10-point checklist, and he was well renowned for being an expert on what makes you successful. And he thought to himself, well, since I've done this, since I've analysed the most successful people, why don't I do it for myself? So he set up a company with venture capitalists who were only too happy to invest in the expert on success, and it failed miserably. So he went back to the drawing board and he thought, well, what is it then? Are these not relevant? Is it just a matter of chance? And on much, much deeper analysis, he figured out eventually that great success is a side effect of someone with a purpose and a vision, which then people buy into. So, for instance, Apple, Steve Jobs, he had a vision of producing something different. And he wanted to produce. He wanted to be not compromising on quality, even things that people couldn't see on the internal workings. He wanted to be perfectly ordered, and as a result of that came success. But if you just say I want to succeed, you probably won't, because that usually is because that's your goal. A goal, you see, the trouble is most people in the world think goals are good things, and we've had this conversation before. But goals are illusionary needs, and needs are things without which you can't live. In other words, air, food, water, shelter. Those are needs. Everything else is a want. But if you're chasing something as if it's a goal, then of course it's a disaster if you don't get it, so you have fear of failure. So you're stressed. You're stressed as you try to do it. And also, sometimes because of the stress, you avoid. So sometimes you give up altogether. So it makes you very vulnerable to the effects of failure, and also you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, but also that comes down to a level of mental toughness, or even which actually encompasses confidence, which is what we're talking about. Because, I mean, using the example of Steve Jobs, I mean, his vision was far bigger than most. Now, if you actually told him from a young age that the expectation, the vision he should have had was far less, he would never have achieved what he actually did. And therefore, he'd have probably just been fixing someone else's computers.
Well,
but his vision and his purpose was a lot bigger. And therefore, which is what he strives to, because we all strive for a level of success and happiness.
Two things there. Your vision, as you said, is absolutely crucial. But of course, more people than you think have vision, but they're not successful. And the reason is this: they did a study, and they took very senior people and junior people, and they found the main difference between them was that successful people acted on their ideas. So therefore, successful people, or people with self-esteem, higher self-esteem, which comes from higher status, act on their ideas. And of course, what's really interesting there is because they were also asking the question, why do very senior people like politicians do really stupid things and get involved in hanky-panky and so on? And of course, one of the inferences was that the higher your self-esteem, the more likely you are to act on any idea and not just visions.
Well, you've got to. This goes back to the theory of Carl Rogers, who was a humanitarian psychologist, I think, in the 1950s. In fact, I think he came up with sexual self-actualization. 1959, I think he came out with that, actually. And one of the things he talks about is basically you're never going to do better than your self-concept. And self-concept comes under your self-worth and your ideal self and things like this. And if you and how you see yourself differs from your ideal self, that's what causes unhappiness, because there's an incongruency between the two. So you have a vision of your ideal self, and then you have how you see yourself, and if the two are in conflict, that's what actually leads to unhappiness.
And that's what the West does all the time, doesn't it? With social media.
No, not necessarily. The thing is, it gives us the opportunity to be to be able to live our lives how we want to. It's one of
be Prime Minister. When Theresa May stepped down from her disastrous premiership, her parting shot was, well, second female Prime Minister, any woman can be Prime Minister, which is complete nonsense.
Well, there's an element of truth there, but the thing is, there is probably one, and there's probably even one in a million. I didn't even know what the statistics on that are of how many people succeed. If you consider how many people actually strive to succeed, you put it down to luck, to some factors, but it's actually far more than that. The people who actually do act and are active are implementing what they are in terms of their vision, and they see that as a goal. Now, I'm not a big lover of goals either, but you've got one, but the thing is that the two things you've got to have is you've got to have a purpose and a very clear vision of what you actually want to achieve, and be able to implement that. But if you don't believe that you are capable of doing that, then your vision's never going to be that high.
Purpose is vision.
This is where Marianne Williamson's talk about you are more powerful beyond measure. So the thing is, if we settle for less than what we're able to, we're always going to be unfulfilled, which is actually going to lead to unhappiness anyway, is it not?
If you know
I'll just emphasize, if you know you're more than what you're actually achieving, then you are. Sorry, what did I say? If you are more than if you believe you are more than what you're actually achieving, then there's a level of unfulfillment there, which means you're not actuating what you actually want to achieve.
But that's a big problem. But then you also said, but if you settle for less, then you're also unhappy. And of course, settling for less is usually a result of fear. It's called avoidance. So if you set some unrealistic goal for yourself and you give up because you're anxious and you avoid, then you settle for less.
But that comes down to mental strength, and mental toughness.
It makes you
all right. And the thing is, naturally, there's only about 10% of the population that have a high level of mental toughness threshold. But the thing is, that can actually be built upon, and that works on confidence, taking on certain challenges, as you say, fear of failure. The thing is, there was a basketball player, Michael Jordan, and he says actually his reason for success was because he wasn't afraid to fail. And he probably, after there's another great quote by him out there somewhere, which said that he's missed the basket X amount of times, and he's missed the winning shot X amount of times, but that never held him back.
Yes, because
from taking the shot.
It was never his goal. His goal was to enjoy playing, and therefore he wouldn't be afraid of failure. And it's interesting because my client, when I was discussing this with him, he said, that's really interesting because one of my bosses, she's actually pretty dopey, but the thing about her is she acts, she keeps on doing things. She in other words, she acts on her thoughts. So if you don't act on your thoughts, and that comes down to self-esteem, then of course you won't be successful.